Chapter 3. The Silver Awakens. Ava sat cross-legged on the floor of her dimly lit apartment, the tome resting in her lap. Its weight felt unnatural, almost alive, as though it were watching her. The air in the room was thick, pressing down on her chest as she stared at the shifting glyphs on the cover. The silver sigil of the wolf seemed to shimmer in the candlelight, beckoning her. Her fingertips hovered over the cover, hesitant. The events at the library had left her shaken, but the pull of the tome was undeniable. She'd tried to leave it locked away in her bag, tried to ignore its presence, but the whispers had followed her. Even now they brushed the edges of her mind, a siren song she couldn't escape. Taking a deep breath, she opened the book. The glyphs inside danced across the pages, glowing faintly as if responding to her presence. Her eyes traced the symbols, and though she didn't recognize the language, the words seemed to flow into her mind as though they had always been there. To awaken what lies within, the light must pierce the shadow, she murmured, the ancient syllables rolling off her tongue unbidden. As the last word left her lips, a sudden surge of energy coursed through her. Pain struck her like a lightning bolt, searing through her limbs and wrenching a scream from her throat. She doubled over, clutching her sides as the world around her blurred. Her body was on fire. Her bones felt as though they were shattering and reforming all at once. The candlelight flared wildly, casting frantic shadows on the walls. She could hear the pounding of her heart, impossibly loud, and beneath it, the low growl of something primal. Her hands shot to her face as a sharp, unbearable pressure built behind her eyes. Her vision swam, and for a moment everything was silver, a blinding, radiant light that consumed her entirely. And then it was over. Ava collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air. Her limbs trembled uncontrollably, her muscles screaming in protest as she tried to push herself up. The room was a wreck. Furniture was overturned, her books scattered and torn. Deep claw marks marred the walls, jagged and raw. She froze, staring at her hands. They weren't hands anymore. Her fingers had elongated, tipped with sharp, glinting claws. Her nails, no, talons, gleamed faintly in the pale moonlight streaming through the window. The sight sent a chill down her spine. The whispers returned, louder this time, no longer brushing against her consciousness but demanding her attention. She could feel something within her stirring, a presence ancient and wild. It wasn't human, but it was undeniably her. The metallic taste of fear coated her tongue as her heightened senses overwhelmed her. She could hear the hum of the electricity in the walls, the faint rustle of leaves outside, the distant murmur of voices blocks away. Her vision sharpened, every detail in the room suddenly painfully vivid. "What is happening to me?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Her reflection caught her eye, and she turned toward the cracked mirror propped against the far wall. What she saw made her breath catch. Her face was still hers, mostly, but her eyes had changed. They glowed faintly, a piercing silver that seemed to pulse with a light of its own. Her cheekbones were more pronounced, her features sharper, almost feral. She stumbled to her feet, her movements unsteady. The room spun, her new senses clashing with her fragile grasp on reality. Panic clawed at her chest, and she let out a choked sob, feeling the weight of what she had become. A sudden knock at the door snapped her out of her spiraling thoughts. "Ava, you in there?" Marisol's voice called from the hallway, muffled but tinged with concern. "You've been quiet all night. Everything okay?" Ava's heart raced. She couldn't let Marisol see her like this. She took a step toward the door, only to stagger back as her claws scraped against the hardwood floor with a grating sound. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she struggled to steady herself. "I'm fine," she called back, her voice cracking. "Just not feeling well. Go home. I'll call you tomorrow." There was a pause, and then Marisol replied hesitantly, "Okay, if you're sure. Just take care of yourself, Ava." Ava waited until she heard Marisol's footsteps, retreating down the hall before collapsing onto her knees. Her claws dug into the floor as she tried to suppress the sobs threatening to overwhelm her. She couldn't stay here. The whispers were growing louder, the pull of the tome stronger. Whatever had been awakened within her, it wasn't going away. She needed answers, and she needed them now. Her gaze fell on the tome, still glowing faintly where it lay on the floor. Its glyphs pulsed in time with her heartbeat, as if mocking her fear. Gritting her teeth, Ava grabbed the book and shoved it into her bag. She glanced around her ruined apartment one last time, the claw marks and broken furniture a stark reminder of the creature she was becoming. Without another thought, she fled into the night, the tome's whispers guiding her toward the unknown.